The evening sky draped the small coastal town of Havenport, Oregon, in hues of sapphire and amethyst, the distant lighthouse casting its rhythmic glow across the waves. Inside her modest beachfront cottage, Clara Monroe, a 63-year-old retired librarian, sat in her armchair, a glass of Merlot in hand, the faint hum of jazz drifting from her vintage radio. The solitude of her life had become a familiar companion since her divorce 5 years ago, each night a quiet ritual of reflection. But tonight something felt different. An electric undercurrent in the air, subtle yet undeniable. Clara glanced at the clock, 10:37 p.m. The house was still, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden floors settling. Her stepson Ethan, a 22-year-old aspiring graphic designer, had retreated to his room after dinner, his footsteps muffled behind the closed door. Curiosity tugged at her, a quiet urge to check on him, to bridge the unspoken distance that had grown between them since he'd moved back home after college. Rising from her chair, Clara set her wineglass on the coaster and padded down the hallway, her bare feet cool against the polished oak. Ethan's door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the dim corridor. She hesitated, her hand hovering near the knob, then gently pushed the door open. The sight stopped her cold. Ethan sat on his bed, his lean frame propped against the headboard, his laptop casting a soft glow across his face. The unmistakable sounds of an adult film filled the room. Moans and whispers that left no room for misinterpretation. His hand moved beneath the blanket, his expression a mix of focus and guilt, his cheeks flushed in the dim light. "Ethan," Clara said, her voice soft, but piercing the heavy silence. He jolted his head, snapping up eyes wide with panic. The laptop slammed shut, the room plunging into near darkness. "Clara, I didn't hear you," he stammered, yanking the blanket higher, as if it could shield him from her gaze. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, her heart racing, but her face composed. Crossing her arms, she leaned against the wall, her silk robe clinging to her curves. "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone calm, but laced with curiosity, though the answer was clear. Ethan's gaze dropped his fingers, twisting the edge of the blanket. I was just..." His voice faltered, unable to form a defense. "It's okay," Clara interrupted, her voice gentle, almost maternal. "You don't have to explain. I know what you were doing." The room fell silent, the tension thick and palpable. Ethan's shoulders hunched, his embarrassment a living thing between them. Clara moved closer, sitting on the edge of the bed, her presence both comforting and unsettling. She studied him, her hazel eyes softening. "Ethan, do you want to talk about it?" He hesitated, his mind a whirlwind of shame and vulnerability. "I'm just nervous," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "About Mia. We've been together for a few months and she wants to take things further. But I don't know what I'm doing. I'm terrified I'll screw it up." Clara nodded, her expression thoughtful. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, her touch warm through his thin t-shirt. "It's normal to feel that way, Ethan. Everyone's nervous their first time. It's a big step, and it's okay to be unsure." His eyes met hers, a mix of gratitude and desperation shimmering in their depths. "But what if I'm awful at it? What if she's disappointed?" Clara chuckled softly, her fingers squeezing his shoulder. "You're overthinking it. Be yourself. Talk to her. Listen to her. Take it slow. It's not about perfection, it's about connection." Ethan nodded, but doubt lingered in his gaze. "I just wish I knew what to expect. I don't want to let her down." Clara's heart ached for him. She wanted to ease his fears, to give him the confidence he craved, but words felt insufficient. "You'll figure it out," she said, standing, her robe slipping slightly to reveal the curve of her collarbone. "Trust yourself." She left the room, closing the door softly, and leaned against the wall in the hallway, her pulse hammering. The image of Ethan's flushed face, his vulnerability, laid bare burned in her mind. She returned to the living room, sinking into her armchair, the jazz now a distant hum against her racing thoughts. How could she help him? What could she do to ensure he felt ready? The questions gnawed at her sleeplessness, looming like a shadow. The days that followed were heavy with unspoken tension. Ethan's confession lingered, a constant reminder of his anxieties. Clara watched him closely, noting the way he fidgeted at breakfast, his fork scraping absently against his plate, his eyes drifting to some distant worry. She'd always been close to Ethan despite not being his biological mother. When she married his father 7 years ago, he'd been a lanky teenager, shy, but kind. Their bond had grown into something warm and familial, a mix of mentorship and friendship. But now faced with his insecurities, Clara felt a fierce urge to guide him, even if it meant crossing lines she'd never imagined. One evening, as she stood in the kitchen slicing tomatoes for dinner, the salty breeze drifting through the open window, Clara caught herself staring at the horizon. Ethan sprawled on the couch in the living room, scrolling through his tablet, his leg bouncing restlessly. She set down her knife, wiped her hands on a towel, and walked to the doorway. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice cutting through the quiet. He looked up, startled. "Yeah, you okay? You've been quiet lately." He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "I'm fine, just thinking." Clara crossed the room and sat beside him, her linen dress clinging to her frame. "Is this about Mia? About what we talked about?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. I can't stop worrying about it. It's all I think about." Her heart twisted. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch lingering. "It's normal to feel this way, but you can't let it consume you. You'll figure it out when the time comes." He looked at her, his blue eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I wish I could be sure. I don't want to mess it up." Clara's resolve hardened. Words weren't enough, she needed to act to show him he had nothing to fear. That night, as she lay in bed, her mind churned with a bold, risky plan. It was unconventional, dangerous even, but it might be the only way to help him. She decided to start small testing, his reactions easing him into a new dynamic. Over the next few days, Clara's behavior shifted subtly but deliberately. She traded her usual loose cardigans for fitted blouses that hugged her still-toned figure, the fabric accentuating her curves. She wore a sleeveless black top that dipped low at the neckline, paired with a skirt that grazed her thighs. At home, she draped herself in a sheer silk robe, the fabric sliding against her skin, hinting at the body beneath. She left the bathroom door ajar, while showering, the steam carrying the scent of her jasmine perfume into the hallway. Ethan's glances were fleeting, but unmistakable, his cheeks flushing as he caught glimpses of her silhouette through the frosted glass. One evening, as she passed him in the hallway, Clara wore a fitted dress that clung to her hips, the hem daringly short. She caught his eyes, lingering, his breath hitching before he looked away, his face reddening. Another time she accidentally sent him a link to an adult film, claiming it was meant for a friend. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, and she watched as he fumbled to close the app, his ears burning. Each interaction left Ethan flustered, his stolen glances betraying a mix of confusion and intrigue. Clara gauged his reactions carefully, her heart pounding with both excitement and trepidation. Her plan was working slowly, dismantling the barriers between them, creating a space where she could guide him in ways that defied convention. By week's end, Clara knew it was time to escalate. She sat at her vanity, brushing her silver-streaked hair, her mind set on the next step. It was a decision that could redefine their relationship, but she was convinced it was the only way to give Ethan the confidence he needed. That night, as they sat across from each other at the dinner table, his fork pushing food around his plate, she made her choice. She would be his guide, his teacher, showing him how to navigate intimacy with assurance and care. The following morning, Clara woke with purpose. She stood in the kitchen pouring coffee, her silk robe loosely tied. Ethan shuffled in his hair, tousled, his eyes heavy with sleep. Morning, he mumbled, his gaze flickering over her before darting away. Good morning, Clara replied, her voice warm and casual. She leaned against the counter, crossing her legs, the robe parting slightly to reveal a glimpse of her thigh. I was thinking about trying that new seafood place downtown. Everyone's talking about it. Why don't you come with me? We could make it a dinner date. Ethan's brows shot up his coffee mug, pausing midway to his lips. A dinner date. Sure, Clara said, shrugging, as if it were the most natural suggestion. We haven't spent much time together lately. It'll be fun. He hesitated, his eyes tracing the curve of her robe before he nodded. Okay, I guess. Great, Clara said, her smile widening. I'll book a table for 7. Be ready, okay? Ethan nodded, still looking dazed. Clara set her mug in the sink, her movements deliberate, and headed upstairs, her heart racing. The first step was complete. She had his attention. Now she needed to ensure the evening went exactly as planned. That afternoon, Clara prepared meticulously. She chose a deep emerald dress that hugged her curves, the fabric shimmering under the light, the neckline plunging just enough to be provocative. She paired it with strappy heels and a delicate silver necklace that rested against her chest. Her makeup was bold, smoky eyes and a crimson lip that demanded attention. Her hair she left loose, cascading in soft waves down her back. When she descended the stairs, Ethan was waiting in the living room, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark jeans. His eyes widened, his Adam's apple bobbing as he took her in. You look incredible, he said, his voice catching. Thank you, Clara replied, her smile soft but confident. Let's go. The drive to the restaurant was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the hum of the engine. At the restaurant, a quaint seaside bistro, the hostess led them to a candlelit table by the window, the ocean waves crashing softly in the distance. Clara sat crossing her legs slowly, her dress riding up to reveal a hint of thigh. She caught Ethan's gaze, lingering, his cheeks flushing as he quickly looked away. They ordered grilled salmon for her, crab linguine for him, and made small talk, Clara steering the conversation to neutral topics, his latest design projects, her book club. But she could see the tension in his posture, the way his fingers drummed against the table. As the evening progressed, she tested the waters. She leaned forward, offering a glimpse of her cleavage, and brushed her foot against his leg under the table. Ethan stiffened, his eyes meeting hers, before darting away, his face reddening. Ethan, she said softly, her voice drawing him back. I want you to know I'm here for you. Whatever you're going through, you can talk to me. He nodded, his voice tight. I know. It's just hard to talk about. Clara reached across the table, her hand covering his, her touch warm and steady. You don't have to go through this alone. Ethan stared at her hand, his breath uneven. Clara, Excuse me, she interrupted, standing and smoothing her dress. I need to use the restroom. In the restroom, Clara steadied herself against the sink, her pulse racing. She reached under her dress, slipping off her lace panties and tucking them into her purse. She touched up her lipstick, checked her reflection, and returned to the table, her resolve unshaken. Sitting down, Clara reached into her purse and slid the folded panties across the table. Keep these, she said, her voice low and intimate, her eyes locked on his. They're yours now. Ethan stared at the panties, his face flaming. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Clara smiled, leaning back and signaling the waiter. Check, please, she said, her tone calm, as if she hadn't just shattered the boundaries between them. The air grew heavier, the candles flickering like silent witnesses to the shift in their dynamic. Ethan's hands trembled as he reached for his water, his mind a chaotic swirl of shock and desire. Clara sipped her wine, her gaze unwavering, knowing the night was only beginning. The bistro's warmth faded as Clara and Ethan stepped into the cool night air, the ocean's rhythm, a steady pulse in the distance. Ethan's hands shook as he unlocked the car, holding the door open for Clara. She slid into the passenger seat, crossing her legs deliberately, her dress inching higher to reveal more of her thigh. Ethan's gaze flickered toward her, his breath catching before he climbed into the driver's seat, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The drive home was a study in silence, the tension between them a living thing. Clara glanced at Ethan, noting the tight set of his jaw, the way his eyes stayed fixed on the road. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft, cutting through the quiet. He flinched, his grip tightening. "Yeah." Clara shifted, uncrossing and recrossing her legs, the movement slow and provocative. The hem of her dress rode higher, offering a fleeting glimpse of what lay beneath. Ethan's eyes darted toward her, then snapped back to the road, his face flushing. "You're awfully quiet," she said, her tone teasing. "Something on your mind?" He shook his head, his voice strained. "No, just thinking about dinner. It was good." Clara's lips curved into a knowing smile. It was delicious," she agreed, her hand resting on the console, her fingers brushing his thigh. The touch was light but deliberate, sending a jolt through him. At a red light, she parted her legs slightly, the dress shifting to reveal more. Ethan's breath hitched, his eyes flickering toward her before he looked away, his cheeks burning. The light turned green, and he pressed the accelerator, his hands gripping the wheel. Clara leaned back, her gaze drifting to the window, maintaining the provocative silence. When they pulled into the driveway, Ethan cut the engine and sat motionless, his breathing shallow. Clara unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to him, her expression soft but resolute. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice warm. "I had a wonderful time." Ethan nodded, his voice barely audible. "Me too." Clara reached over, tilting his chin to meet her gaze. "Ethan, you don't have to be afraid. I'm here for you, whatever you're feeling." She leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to his cheek, her breath warm against his skin. "Let's go inside." She stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement as she walked to the cottage. Ethan followed, his heart pounding, the folded panties in his pocket, a burning reminder of the night's audacity. Inside, the familiar scent of lavender and sea salt felt charged, the air thick with possibility. Clara set her purse on the entryway table and turned to Ethan, her eyes expectant. "Why don't we sit for a while?" she suggested, her voice firm yet inviting. "We can talk." Ethan hesitated, his pulse racing. He knew this wasn't just about talking. The way she'd teased him, the panties, the kiss, it all pointed to something more. "Okay," he mumbled, his voice hoarse. Clara led the way to the living room, her hips swaying subtly. She stopped at the bar cart, holding up a bottle of bourbon. "Want one?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Sure," Ethan said, his throat dry. Clara bent over to pour the drinks, her dress riding up to reveal the curve of her thigh. She lingered, knowing his eyes were on her, then straightened and handed him a glass, their fingers brushing. She sat on the couch, crossing her legs, the dress revealing more skin. Patting the space beside her, she locked eyes with him. Ethan sat, leaving a small gap, his gaze fixed on the floor. The panties in his pocket felt like a secret too heavy to carry. Clara leaned forward, her hand brushing his leg. "Ethan, look at me," she said, her voice gentle but commanding. He turned, his eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Clara's hand covered his, her touch warm. "You don't have to be scared. I'm here for you. Whatever you're feeling, you can talk to me." Ethan swallowed hard. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Clara said, shifting closer, her leg brushing his. "Just listen." She uncrossed her legs, the dress riding higher, and recrossed them. The movement deliberate, leaning in, her lips grazed his ear. "Do you trust me?" Ethan's body trembled. "Yes," he whispered. Clara smiled, her hand moving to his thigh, her touch light but electric. She leaned in and kissed him, her lips soft and deliberate. Ethan froze, shock rooting him to the spot. But then something shifted. He melted into the kiss, his hands trembling as they found her waist. The kiss deepened, Clara guiding him with confidence, her hands moving to his shoulders, pulling him closer. Ethan's breath hitched a soft moan escaping as Clara's lips moved against his. She pulled back her breath, mingling with his. "Follow my lead," she whispered, guiding his hands to her hips, then up her sides, teaching him to touch with intention. His fingers traced the fabric of her dress, feeling the heat of her skin beneath. The kiss resumed bolder now, Ethan's hands exploring her curves. Clara's fingers brushed the back of his neck, sending shivers through him. After a moment, she pulled back her lips, grazing his cheek. "Just a moment," she said, standing and walking to the hallway, her dress swaying. Ethan sat, his hands trembling, his mind reeling. The warmth of her lips lingered, the softness of her skin etched in his memory. When Clara returned, she stood in the doorway, clad in a black lace nightie that hugged her curves, the delicate fabric, leaving little to the imagination. She leaned against the frame, her arms crossed, her expression confident. "Do you like what you see?" she asked, her voice low and teasing. Ethan's breath caught his eyes, locked on her. "Yes," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Clara smiled, walking toward him, her movements slow and deliberate. She stopped in front of him, tilting his chin to meet her gaze. "Good," she whispered, her lips brushing his ear. She stepped back, her smile teasing. "Patience," she said, her voice commanding. Ethan nodded, his breath ragged. Clara turned, glancing over her shoulder. "Come with me," she said, leading him to her bedroom. Inside the room was warm, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air. The bedside lamp cast a golden glow, the bed inviting with its soft sheets. Clara closed the door, her hands resting on Ethan's chest, feeling his racing heart. "Are you nervous?" she asked, her tone probing. "A little," Ethan admitted, his voice trembling. Clara smiled, brushing her thumb against his cheek. "We'll take it slow." She kissed him slow and deep, her hands guiding his to the lace of her nightie. She pushed him gently onto the bed, straddling his waist, her hands on his chest. "Let me show you," she whispered. Clara guided Ethan through their intimate encounter, her movements patient and deliberate. She taught him how to touch her, how to explore her body with confidence. "Like this," she murmured, guiding his hand to the small of her back. Ethan followed, his fingers trailing over her skin, his heart racing. Her lips found his, the kiss deep and full of promise. Ethan's hands grew bolder, exploring her curves, losing himself in the moment. When it was over, they lay entwined, their bodies warm and spent. Clara rested her head on his chest, her fingers tracing patterns on his skin. "You were amazing," she whispered. Ethan smiled, his hand on her back. "You taught me well." Clara chuckled, her voice soothing. "Get some rest." They drifted off, their bodies close, the night sealing their secret. Morning light filtered through the curtains, the room quiet save for the distant crash of waves. Ethan woke, Clara's warmth beside him, her breathing steady. His body felt relaxed, but a tension lingered in his chest, the weight of what they'd done. Clara stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Good morning," she said, her voice husky. "Morning," Ethan replied, his voice soft. "You okay?" she asked, propping herself up, her hand on his chest. Ethan hesitated. I don't know," he admitted. Clara nodded, her expression understanding. "It's okay to feel conflicted. This was a big step. Take it one step at a time." He nodded, her words easing some of his guilt. They lay together, the moment tender, until Clara slipped out of bed, tying a silk robe around her waist. "I'm starving." "Breakfast." Ethan nodded, taking her hand as they headed to the kitchen. Clara cooked pancakes with fresh berries, her conversation light, easing the tension. They ate by the window, the ocean sparkling outside, the morning feeling almost normal. After breakfast, Clara took his hand, her tone serious. "I know this is complicated. I don't regret last night, and I hope you don't either. But take your time to process this for you, for Mia." Ethan looked at her, his voice quiet. I don't regret it. But I don't know what this means. I want you to be happy, Clara said, her thumb brushing his hand. I'm here whatever that looks like. They cleared the table, the conversation flowing easily, the morning brighter. As Clara glanced at Ethan, she smiled. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together.